The other bad translation is the word ego, mostly because the word didn't exist until the late 1800s, and therefore it wasn't even around when these texts were written thousands of years ago. Yet spiritual teachers in the West continually use the word as if it's actually in the texts and teachings. If there's one area of Eastern spiritual practice in the West that's in a state of utter confusion, it's the issue of the ego and what it means. For psychologists, this one is particularly annoying because ego in psychology has a totally different meaning from how spiritual folks use the word. And to make things even more confusing, neither the Eastern spiritual definition nor the psychology definition have anything to do with the street meaning of ego, like being conceited and always right and self-important and so on. Years ago, Buddhist teachers in the West started using the term egolessness to explain the state of mind that meditation aims to achieve. The word is supposed to mean that humans make a fundamental error of perception by thinking that we consist of a lasting, separate self, even though no such self really exists. And by making this error, we hurt ourselves and everyone around us by becoming selfish, getting embroiled in our passions and problems and so on. If we could only see the fallacy of our self-centered egos and understand its bad effects, we would let it go and find true happiness in the interconnectedness that's our true nature. Now, this idea is often communicated with vehemence. Teachers who are usually pretty gentle and non-judgmental can turn almost vicious when they talk about the ego. It's common to portray it as some sort of negative, evil part of ourselves. They refer to it as being a neurotic, useless, self-harming function. Others are even more extreme. They talk about it like it's some sort of tyrannical bureaucracy we need to overthrow, a nervous, scheming, devious creature we need to eliminate. The message is always that the ego is so tenacious and damaging, we need to be constantly vigilant about this human scourge and work to eradicate it. It reminds me of how we think of a virus or a crime. But if you're a psychologist and hear these attacks on the ego, you shake your head in disbelief. Because in psychology, the ego isn't viewed as being evil at all. It's not even a singular thing you can attack. It's a cluster of activities, a set of highly important functions in the mind. Every time you mediate between your raw desires or urges and what you know you should do in a given moment, you're using your ego function. It's a mental strategy for staying safe and being happy in the midst of all the conflicting demands shouting in your mind. It enables you to say no to your desire to have sex with your neighbor's wife, or to punch someone in the face, or to take a crap in the street, in the interest of your greater happiness. If your ego is healthy, it gives you a consistent sense of priorities, helps you define where your responsibilities are and aren't, and shows you right and wrong. It also monitors your experiences so you can learn from them. From this perspective, egolessness would be a disaster. A person devoid of ego functions would be self-destructive, like a beast with uncontrolled impulses, or a neurotic, repressed robot with no mind of her own, an infantile monster. Anyone who tried to abandon ego functioning would arrest his psychological development and wouldn't be able to become a mature, responsible, trustworthy adult. Now, this isn't only the view of trained Western psychologists. Buddhist communities in the West have finally begun to recognize this problem and have coined the term spiritual bypassing to describe it. It refers to the way some folks try to avoid dealing with their problems by spending all their time in meditation retreats, using the mantra of egolessness to short-circuit the hard work of developing a healthy ego that can help them navigate their lives. This also happens in situations where people suffer from extreme self-hatred. The Dalai Lama isn't the only Asian Buddhist teacher surprised at the amount of self-hatred found in the West. Hating yourself is incredibly painful because it prevents you from building a healthy ego, and some people deal with it by embracing the idea of egolessness and using it as the Buddha's stamp of approval for avoiding their self-hatred. I remember one client I had who was a highly experienced meditation instructor, and he would attend these year-long meditation retreats where for long periods of time they wouldn't even speak. And he was an expert at it. He thrived there. But he came into the session with me complaining that he had been caught in traffic for an hour and his child was whining. That was difficult for him. The bottom line is your ego is incredibly important. It's the vehicle through which you navigate life. You need it. I mean, in a way, the whole thing is silly. It's your ego that decides that mindfulness meditation would be good for you and that you should have the discipline to practice every day. If you had no ego, you'd sit on your sofa and do nothing. No, wait, you wouldn't have a sofa because you wouldn't have a job. The fact is, the Buddhist and Hindu texts are full of recommendations for strengthening your ego, and there are no passages that recommend getting rid of it. The Buddha defines a wise person as one who knows the difference between what are and aren't his personal responsibilities. Well, guess what? This is the first principle in any ego functioning. And this is based on another assumption that's necessary for a healthy ego, the teaching on karma, that we are responsible for our actions and we're going to experience their results. But the ultimate refutation of the idea that meditation is for losing your ego is the fact that the Buddha's own discourses on mindfulness very often describe the meditator's self-awareness using the terms I, me, mine, and so on. That's the ego. So how did poor Mr. Ego get so confused on his trip from Asia to the West? The meaning of ego in Asian languages is actually quite similar to the street meaning of ego in the West. Pride, narcissism, conceit, self-importance, arrogance, thinking you're all that. But Asian spiritual traditions don't use this word in their texts. As I said, it didn't exist yet. It's a psychology term from Sigmund Freud and from John Dewey before him. It comes from the Latin word meaning I.